Enjoy. There we
All right, and we are live. This is the Free Culture Sports Show, November 22nd. We had original plans to showcase Premier League team for you this week, Southampton. That has been moved to a later date. So today, kind of punting, if you'll pardon the pun, um, we are switching up to Gridiron, college Gridiron this week, talking about some NCAA football. Um, but before we get into that, we are still looking for fans of teams to join us. If you are a fan of Aston Villa, Everton, Hull, Man City, Newcastle, or Sunderland, we would love to have you join us to highlight your team this season. Um, so that's it. That's all the EPL talk we'll have for today. Let's
go.
jump right in. Um,
Well, before we jump right in, I just wanted to say that the punting pun does work, but it would also work in the EPL. I mean,
that's true.
goalkeepers do punt the ball, so
I thought about that, but I,
it's a good thing to tie them together. So
true, true.
everybody punts.
If you got a ball and you got a foot. Um, so the first thing we can talk about as far as college football this season is the Heisman race. It's the biggest award, or has grown to be the biggest award in college football for individual achievement. In past years, it seemed like the best quarterback on the best team has won the Heisman by default. But this year, it's going to be a little bit different. It could still be a quarterback. The front runner is Marcus Mariota from Oregon, and if they win out, he's probably going to win. But there's a lot of other candidates because he hasn't really. I guess the word is he hasn't done amazing stuff because he's been doing this his whole career. So this season, how is this season any different than other seasons? So why give it to him this year? Um, I guess the answer would be that nobody else has really deserved it either. Uh,
Well, and I mean, there were questions about Jameis Winston last year, some of the allegations, but there have been even more allegations now. So, some people didn't vote for him last year because of some of the allegations, but now there are some people that are even refusing to put him on the ballot at all this year. So, I think, and also the fact that he won it last year. I
mhm.
mean, there's only been one person that's won the Heisman Trophy twice, if I remember correctly. So, it just doesn't happen. Archie Griffith or Griffin rather, of of Ohio State in 74, 75 is the only two-time winner that I'm aware of. Certainly in anything approaching a modern era, he's the only two-time winner.
Yeah, and I think because if you were to win it, they expect you to be so much greater the next year.
Yeah.
You just his numbers and his team just haven't looked much better, if at all, any better than last year. So that's probably why his name has dropped off. Even if he's performed the same as he did last year, you've got to elevate to win it again, and he just hasn't done that.
Yeah,
Um,
and I would say too. I mean, you're talking about the quarterback. Now, quarterbacks do tend to win it, but it was just '09 when Ingram won it as a running back, and then before that, of course, it's been taken away. At least that's what I think has happened. But Reggie Bush won it as a running back in
mhm.
2005, and then Ron Dayne won it as a running back in '99, and then the year before that in '98, Ricky Williams won it, and then the last non-running back, non-quarterback to win it was Charles Woodson, cornerback slash punt returner in 1997. So, I mean, it's not too far back. It's only 5 years ago that.
Well, yeah, I guess there were exceptions, but I mean, if you look at the overall picture, it's usually a quarterback probably 70% of the time, at least in
Yeah.
the past decade or two.
Yeah. Yeah, I think more running backs used to win it. Of course, the game has become more of a throwing game, so that's one of the reasons
Hmm.
why that they've. But yeah, I think ever since maybe the '80s, quarterbacks have pretty much dominated the award.
Hmm. Well, there is running back on the list who everybody's high on, and that's Gordon from Wisconsin. He just ran over Nebraska like for
Yeah.
408 yards, setting a new. Is it an NCAA record or just an FBS record? I can't remember. I
I,
think it's just an FBS record.
I'm pretty sure it's just a FBS record. So certainly the one that they were comparing it to was TCU, which is another FBC
Yeah,
school.
I think it was just an FBS record, Division 1A. And so that he was already kind of in the Heisman talk, but after a performance like that, he is in some minds jumped to number one, some minds still number two. I think we both agreed that Mariota's one and Gordon's two.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and probably rightfully so, that to a certain extent the Heisman, it can be at least sort of a career achievement award, and Mariota's been so close that I think he might get it just because of that. I mean, if you compare just this season, then of course I think the same is true with Gordon. I mean, I think to get on the radar, unless you are just absolutely killing it for a national championship team, you've got to have been there before. I mean, and I guess the freshman, which that's new, having a freshman win it, but that's the one case. Of course, in Winston did win the national championship, so that's another thing. I mean, Wisconsin is not in the national championship picture, and that's really going to hurt them. Even if they were like sort of on the outside looking in as a one-loss team after that LSU team, I think if they had beaten Northwestern, he would really be there. Like that Northwestern, not only for his Heisman chances, but for Wisconsin in general, I really think hurt them. I mean, it was a close game, but they needed to win that, basically,
Yeah.
is what it amounts to. And they could still, I think, pretty easily make it back to the Big Ten championship game. Now, if they beat Ohio State, or whoever ends up in, I mean, Ohio State's going to be the biggest scalp, of course, but if they win the Big Ten championship game, then I think Gordon might have a chance. And if they don't make it to the Big Ten championship game, no chance at all. And maybe if they even lose, but he has another 300-yard game against Ohio State or Michigan State, then he might still be in there. But I think that you have to put it in the context of the team. And of course, I guess part of that context is he carrying the team? And I think to some extent, I mean, they don't really throw the ball a lot at Wisconsin, but it's not just Gordon. I mean, they have other running backs. So,
Mm-hmm. Well, the one, I guess, kind of third guy outside looking in all season, his name's kind of been thrown around for this, is one that we both know very well. It's Amari Cooper, wide receiver from Alabama. He may be the best prospect by position for the NFL. Him being a wide receiver and being probably the best wide receiver in the nation. But it's tough for a wide receiver to win because you rely so much on the quarterback to get you the ball. And if you're blowing a team out, you're going to be running the ball instead of passing the ball. I was just looking at his numbers game by game. And for the first 4 games of the season, he did not have less than 130 yards and over 8 catches in every single game. Against Florida, he had 3 touchdowns and 201 yards. And then the next week, the 5th game, Ole Miss, he had 9 catches for 91 yards. So he's still close to the 100. Then against Arkansas, however, when the Crimson Tide kind of stalled completely, he only had 2 catches. But then he picked it back up against A&M and Tennessee, 140, 224 yards, 2 touchdowns in both games. But then in the last 2, LSU, Mississippi State, granted, very tough teams, tough to win in LSU. Mississippi State was the number 1 team. He had 8 catches for 83 and 88 yards and had a touchdown in each game. So he's been doing very well with the exception of that Arkansas game. But is it enough as a wide receiver? Even if you break school records, you lead the nation in touchdowns, is that enough to win the Heisman Trophy? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that probably for a wide receiver to win it, either they just need to be ridiculous. Not to say that Cooper hasn't been, but I think the thing that would really help them is if they were kick or punt returning as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you run back a couple of kicks for touchdowns, and that really gets people's attention. Just because they're almost by definition a long way you have to go, and you have to beat all 11 of their dudes. Now, it may be pretty easy with all the blocker, if you get good help from your blockers. You may not have to do a ton, but other than just sort of run the field. But you can catch touchdown passes that are 1 yard passes, So you can't run back kicks that are 1 yard kicks. That just doesn't happen. I mean, it's a blocked kick at that point, and you're not the person on the end of it at that point. So I think the fact that he doesn't do that for Alabama probably hurts him. But think about like Steve Smith at the Carolina Panthers, like when he was doing that. I mean, that's when he made a name for himself, is when he was able to do that. And once they realized how good he was, they took him off of that because they didn't want him to get hurt. But um, you know,
Well, he's not leading the league, Cooper, in receptions. He's behind by like 12. He has 87, but he is leading the nation in yards by about 23, 25 yards. Now, the person he's ahead of has 20 fewer catches than him, but he plays at Colorado State. What's the competition against Colorado State? And he doesn't have the league in touchdowns either, just because some of these high-powered offenses that throw the ball, 800 times a game.
when you say league, you mean FBS.
Yes, I mean the NCAA FBS. Yes, he is tied for fourth in touchdowns with a host of other people. So it would be, I guess, the level of competition and the amount of production that he's had put together is kind of just, you are an amazing player, but it's still just tough to get you the Heisman Trophy. But again, it goes back to, like I said, you've got to have the quarterback to get you the ball. And like what you said, you probably got to be a returner of some kind, like Charles Woodson was when he won it.
Right. Of course, he wasn't a receiver either. He was a quarterback.
No. But he wouldn't have won it just as a cornerback had he not been returning punts and kicks.
Definitely not.
So, continuing the Alabama note, let's move. We're going to go league by league for as much time as we can afford. First, let's talk about the SEC because that's where Alabama is from. We can talk about their whole season if we want to. We also want to spend some time talking about Kentucky. We might just be quicker to get Kentucky out of the way. They're one game away from being bowl eligible, but they've been that way for several weeks now.
I think they were 5-1, and we had this discussion, and I was like, dude, I do not think they are going to a bowl game.
I thought they could pull out a win. I thought Missouri was basically their one chance to become bowl eligible. They play a lot better at home from the games that I've seen. They were very, very close on the scoreboard with Mississippi State, but they don't have enough depth on defense and special teams. So they'll be there. They're getting some good recruiting classes. They'll be there. Just not this season, maybe. And who knows? They could beat Louisville.
They could, yeah.
But, it could happen. We'll see.
Well, we just saw. Maybe I don't know what the rankings are, and I haven't seen either of them play other than some snippets. Florida State versus Louisville, but UNC not. I guess UNC's bowl eligible now, but
yeah.
That's the same place Kentucky is at, though. I guess one game away from being bowl eligible, and they beat the snot out of what was perceived to be a pretty good Duke team.
Yep.
That went to a bowl game last year. It was ranked in the top 25. So, the same thing. It's another rivalry game. I don't know. Is it at Louisville or is it at UK?
That's what I've tried to remind myself to look that up, but I just haven't done that. It is at Louisville.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think, of course, again, in comparison to UNC Duke game, that game was at Duke.
It was.
So.
It could happen.
It could happen.
I put the chances low, but it could happen.
Yeah. So you have it here that this Bama team has not impressed you that much, and I thought the same thing ever since the beginning of the season. I thought maybe the Texas A&M game was them turning the corner, but they were just so sloppy in the early games.
Mm-hmm.
So many fumbles. They still beat Florida by a pretty good margin, but I think they ended up giving up 24 points, and most of that was just because of the fumbles. And if they take care of the football, they are definitely one of the best teams in the nation, but they aren't necessarily definitively the best team. And it's just so weird because that is not something you expect from a Saban team, for them to be giving up the football like that. So.
Yeah, and I mean the most points they've given up in a game is 23. They rank second in defense in points per game, which is usually where they're at. Is second. It looks like the total's a little bit higher than normal, but maybe I'm remembering earlier season where it's closer to like 10 points. Now it's up to like 14.5. But I think they're the only team in the nation that hasn't given up at least 24 points in one game.
Yeah, I said 24 to Florida. It was 21 to Florida. But, I mean, Florida probably shouldn't have scored in that game.
Probably not.
So, I mean, they're giving up 21 points from being sloppy with the ball, basically. So, I mean, that's, you can't, granted Florida is not a good team, but you can't do that against good teams. And obviously they haven't. I mean, they beat LSU, they beat Mississippi State. Those are good. They ended up losing to Ole Miss, but again, in that loss to Ole Miss, they were coughing up the football.
Mm-hmm.
So
they still only gave up 23 points. I mean, they just couldn't score.
That's true. But I mean, well, yeah, when you're driving down the field and then you lose the ball, you don't score. So, of course, I guess it says something about Florida that Alabama was still able to put 42 up on them, even though they were giving away the football. And again, that West Virginia game, they gave up 23 points in that game, and again, if they hadn't given up the football, they wouldn't have scored that many points. So, if they do that against Auburn, they're going to lose to Auburn, and if they do that against whoever comes out of the East in the SEC championship game, then they're going to lose that game. If they do that in their bowl game, they're going to lose that. I think they can probably afford to give the ball away a couple times to Western Carolina, and they'll probably still be okay.
Probably. So, I mean, the real question, I think, hasn't been the defense. I mean, the defense has given up. Like I said, it looks like on paper they've given up more points than they have been. They're still second in the nation, and like I said, it's given the other team possessions and good field position maybe sometimes.
Absolutely.
That has hurt the defense. It's been the offense, and maybe it's because they're just not as good running the ball. TJ Yeldon just hasn't been the same, and I think this goes to their offensive line just isn't right this year. I mean,
Drake got hurt. So, I mean, a lot of years they have a sort of a two-back tandem, and Drake got hurt. So
there's that too.
That's part of the problem, is Yeldon's having to do all the work rather than splitting the time. So
we'll see. They should be able to get it around. Maybe use Western Carolina as a guide to hold on to the football. Do the best we can to avoid turnovers. Get back to the running game. Make sure running game is working strong. Give Yeldon some rest. I don't think he needs too much rest, but share the load some more, and figure some things out. And I think they'll be ready for Auburn. But it's like, I mean, you have one bad game, and that could be it for their tournament chances. I mean, they're number one right now, but if they lose another game, are they still going to be in the top 4? I guess it's how they lose for this committee. If they lose a close game against Auburn or against Georgia in the SEC championship game,
I think Bama's probably out, just because Auburn and Georgia are not as good as you might hope if you're going to lose to them.
Yeah.
I mean, Auburn has 3 losses now. I don't know what Georgia's situation is, but they've been sort of like up and down. No, I mean, I guess the counterpoint to that is, despite Georgia being so badly, I think they're still ranked 10th in their poll. Maybe that was from last week. I don't remember, but Georgia hasn't been good, basically. So you just have to see at the end of the year what they do. So you have actually, I was just looking this up, and I'm going to skip over just because it was in my head, but skip over the ACC real quick and go to the big. Is you have in Ohio State over Wisconsin in here, and I was just looking this up, and I didn't think this was the case, but neither of those teams is clinched.
Well, I think if they both I think if they both win out, Wisconsin. Well, Ohio State is much closer than Wisconsin is because Wisconsin is are they 5-1 or 6-1 in the conference, and they've got two other teams on their side that only has one loss, Nebraska and Minnesota. I think those are the two teams. I'll have to double check, but I think those are the best two teams out of. I apologize. It was Michigan State, which is 5-1, which is Ohio State, and Nebraska and Minnesota and Iowa all have two losses,
Right.
while Wisconsin has one loss. So they're ahead, and they should be, I think, the ones that end up being in there. But I guess there's chances that they're not. I just think that will be the Big Ten championship, and I think those are the best two teams from their respective sides in the Big Ten.
Yeah. So I didn't really have. We already talked about Gordon. I don't know that we needed to talk anymore about the Big Ten. I was just trying to look that up, and then I was like, oh yeah, we should make sure we say that. Did you want to talk anything about? We already talked about UNC Duke a little bit, but in the ACC, it is Georgia Tech versus FSU.
Yeah,
We know the championship winners. FSU is FSU. Apparently, from what I've been listening, Georgia Tech just. I mean, I guess this is true of any team. If you don't do a good job prepping for their unusual offense, then they might get you. But I mean, and I guess FSU has Florida before they have Georgia Tech, so they're not going to have 2 weeks to prep for them. But can you see Georgia Tech springing the upset?
I mean, I could. I would have to go back to see how they did last year. To see if the two teams played last year to see kind of how close they were. I don't know if Georgia Tech's probably a little bit better than last year based off what I've seen. Their two losses this season were to UNC and Duke, and they were only by 6 and 5 points apiece. So they've been beating teams. They just beat the snot out of Clemson. Granted, Clemson's quarterback got injured in that game, but they're still winning. They're finding ways to win. Now they play Georgia on November 29th, and that'll be kind of the telltale sign of is Georgia as good as their ranking, or is Georgia Tech actually better than their number 18 ranking, being 9-2? And then I think based off that game, I'll see if they have a chance of beating Florida State, because if they can beat Georgia, they can definitely beat Florida State.
All right, so we actually have to be somewhere, I guess, right where we're sitting, but we have a meeting at 10:30, so we should probably wrap this up. I'm gonna leave the links to the conference championship games in the show notes here. But was there anything else before we go that you wanted to discuss?
Well, I just wanted to give a shout out to Marshall and their undefeated season so far. Second in points in offense and fifth in points on defense. They're beating teams by an average of over 30 points per game. Their closest win was 19 points. They need to be in the top 25, I think, in order to get that coveted bowl, BCS bowl game.
They have to win their championship game.
Yes, they have to win They have to win their conference, and I think they have to be ranked, because I think they have to be the highest ranked.
Well, so, but if none of them are ranked, then it just goes to the best team. So yeah, this is a matter of some controversy, because it's possible that none of them will be ranked. But it is, and it's not us saying like, oh, the committee's just not going to pick a conference champion. That's actually written into the rules that. Of that group of 6, or group of 5 rather, teams that must be a conference champion. Mm-hmm. So
the highest ranked conference champion from the group of 5. I can't remember what they're called, but the group of 5 conferences, and they have to be ranked, and they're just not ranked right now.
Yep. So.
But that's it.
All right. Well. Did we say at the beginning? I don't think I put it up there. Maybe I did up there, but I don't remember you saying that people can donate at patreon.com/FCSS, and that's gonna be it for us on the Free Culture Sports Show.